Let's jump to running back. The running back room, headed up by Mr. Brian Applewhite, who has been quite good at developing guys. He got the guy that he really wanted in Anthony Grant, and a lot of people think that Anthony Grant's going to run out on the field in Dublin and be the starter. I don't know, because Ramir was just so doggone effective for the last half of the season last year. What do you think? Do you think we're going to see a running back by committee approach just like we did last year and all the years under Ryan Held? Or is Brian Applewhite going to be a dude that really wants to find that bell cow, that guy that can go 25 to 30 carries a game? What do you think?
So I really did. I spent like an hour earlier really trying to dig into Brian Applewhite and his coaching philosophy in the running backs room. And it's very, I want to say inconsistent because that sounds negative, but it's hard to predict from what I could tell. And I really didn't know how to interpret it. There were times at TCU where he always had a constant rotation of guys, but then there was a few moments where he had his bell cow. And he was very situational. And so what is he going to do at Nebraska? I hope he picks a bell cow. But the way that I interpret our running back room, I don't think that a bell cow is, I don't think that it's necessarily plausible. If it were a bell cow situation, it would be some sort of like, I mean, I do think that that Anthony Grant's going to take the majority of the snaps. Like, that's what I think.
Okay.
So would that be a bell cow? Sure. But I do think that we'll have Yant and we'll have Ramir Johnson and we'll have Gabe Irvin. They will be, if there would be a rotation, it would be those three behind Anthony Grant, which would be a bell cow. But I don't think that Anthony Grant is just going to be the guy all the time. And then we take these other three and put them into situations like every once in a while. Like, no, what I would want to see is one guy for 70% of the snaps. That's what I would want to see.
Me too.
But with the amount of athleticism, it's arguable. With the amount of athleticism that we've got in a running back room, especially with, Marquise Buford Jr. saying on Corn Craze, his live stream that he did with him, saying that the running back room is insanely deep and they're athletic and they're dogs and they are the most improved room on the offense. That makes me more inclined to think that Brian Applewhite is going to have a running back by committee type of situation. And maybe it's just recency bias that we've just seen running back room by committee. Like, that's what we've seen for the majority of the last 4 years. And so why would that necessarily change? I mean, we've got a new running backs coach. Sure.
Yeah.
But like, what? I don't know. A good coach isn't predictable. So like, why would I assume that I can predict Brian Applewhite's plan? I'm more inclined to think that it will still be a running back by committee, but with Anthony Grant taking the higher percentage of snaps.
So what do you think that is? 55 to 60%, 65 or over? What do you think?
I think it would be like 45% with 55% split between the other three. So he wouldn't take the majority. He wouldn't take the overall majority, but he would take the majority between four guys.
Okay.
And
those four guys are what? Grant, Yant, Johnson, and Irvin?
Yep.
That's kind of where I land too. I think Irvin was getting ready to take off last year. I think that spot where he cut and he was going to hit that hole against Oklahoma, that was a wide open hole. He was good to go for minimum 20 yards on that play if he doesn't blow out his knee. And I think he was really getting ready to take off. I don't think you throw that talent and sit it on a shelf for a couple of years. I think you need to use it. So Grant, for me, is number one. I think he runs out there, just like you said, on the first snap into Blinn. I think you were kind of had kind of what a lot of people have said on podcasts over the last few weeks, from way back when we did our offensive podcast with the Husker Podcast. I think you were the one that said you thought Ramir Johnson was going to move into more of a slot role, more of a Swiss Army knife role, kind of like what we think Logan Smothers is going to be. I don't see a lot of Ramir Johnson lining up in the backfield. He may line up in the backfield to begin a formation, but I think he motions out a lot more often than he used to. And then I think Gabe Ervin is that next guy in with Yant coming in to be kind of that thumper inside the 20 in that Wildcat package when Logan Smothers is in there, because do you want to tackle lightning or do you want to tackle thunder, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I see it.
Yeah, that's
any other thoughts on that?
No, I think the perfect. I think you kind of segued into. Well, I want to say segue because we're still going to stay on the same topic, but with Ramir Johnson, like, it's not that I don't like the guy. It's not that I don't think he's a good running back. I just think that if you stack him up in comparison to the other three athletes that we just labeled off, such as Jacques Yant and Anthony Grant and Gabe Ervin, you know, I don't think Gabe Ervin's much bigger than Ramir Johnson, maybe like 10, 15 pounds more, but still bigger. What you just said, I think that Ramir Johnson is going to be a key role on our offense, but it's not going to be the bell cow. He's
right.
He has a particular set of skills that the Big Ten is good at stopping after a certain amount of repetition. You know, like if we just keep lining him up in the backfield, people know how to dial that up. And what I see from him, like you said, I see a specialist role where he lines up in the backfield with Grant or with Yant, you know, whichever one, Ervin, whoever. And then he motions to the slot. Quarterback is able to read the linebackers, see where they shift and move. And then it wouldn't surprise me if he motions on the snap,
right,
and then takes a sweep. You know, like that would be his bread and butter, because he's just insanely fast. But yeah, you know, I just don't, and it breaks my heart because Ramir Johnson he's poured a lot of time and energy in this program. Like, he's been here for a while, and he was one of those guys that I remember. I think it was when we first started this podcast and we were doing the preseason last year. He was one of those guys that I thought, and I feel like I said it out on the podcast, is that I'm thinking at that point, I'm like, he's going to be transferring. Like, I see him as a transfer prospect, and he hasn't. He's stuck it out. He's been here the whole time. Like, this guy he has taken
just like Logan has. Yep.
Yeah, they are committed. And so I think that if he's that committed, that means he's confident. And if he's confident, that means that his coaches are coaching confidence in him. So they obviously have a plan for him. It's just not the bell cow. And I'm really excited to see what that means.
Yep, I agree. I completely agree.